Slide 1 is an image of absorption in the small intestine. Slide 2 is the difference between active and passive transport. And slide 3 is the large intestine's absorption of water and minerals. Before we actually start talking about absorption, we're going to talk about the difference between active and passive transport. These are two methods of moving substances from one place to another, whether it's in living organisms or just in active systems on the planet. The human body uses both active and passive transport very, very often. And the interesting thing is that passive transport costs no energy for the human body to use. It uses natural gradients to actually get molecules to move from one place to another. Whereas active transport will cost a small amount of energy to actually move something from one place to another. So it's kind of the equivalent of taking two steps forward, and then taking one step back, and then taking 2 steps forward, taking 1 step back, and so on and so forth. The general direction is still forward, but it is coming at a small cost. So knowing the idea of active and passive transport, let's go back to the small intestine. The small intestine has a diameter of about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. It is a very small tube. Now, the interesting thing about the inside of the actual tube is that even though the outside is nice and circular, the inside is not circular. It is actually undulating, and that's super important because by undulating like so and creating these villi, these finger-like projections, it increases the surface area that the chyme is exposed to. And in this case, the brown substance in the center is chyme. That is that soupy mixture that's broken down food from the stomach and the duodenum. So if we were to actually take the length of this circle and open it up, it would have a surface area of about this long. Whereas with the undulations of the villi, we see that there's a much larger surface area where blood vessels are exposed to the inside of the actual small intestine, which allows for maximum nutrient absorption. So just to let you know that on these actual villi, we also have, just to better absorb, even smaller little projections called microvilli. And these villi and microvilli allow for pretty much all of the nutrients that are absorbed in the small intestine to be absorbed there. Those nutrients are carbohydrates, proteins or amino acids, because the proteins are broken down, fatty acids, vitamins. Okay, those are the 4 that are mostly absorbed in the actual small intestine. Then we make it to the large intestine, and the large intestine is much smaller in length than the small intestine. The large intestine is about 1.5 to 2 meters, whereas the small intestine is about, 6 to 7 meters. Its diameter is also much greater. We're looking at about maybe a 3 to 4 centimeter diameter, whereas the small intestine has a diameter of 2.5 or so centimeters. Now, what ends up happening here, although the large intestine is part of the elimination section, which is the next video, it is a vital absorber of both minerals and water. Now, what ends up happening, the reason that water is kind of always kept till the bitter end is that we need water in the actual feces to help move it along. Otherwise, it solidifies. Okay, and moving it from one place to another is very hard on the smooth muscle that surrounds the large intestine. So we keep the water in it. And as the chyme or this mixture makes its way up the actual ascending colon, across the transverse colon, and down the descending colon, there's two key things happening here. There are blood vessels in tissue that surround the large intestine. A tremendous amount of blood vessels surround both the small and the large intestine. And what ends up happening here is the body uses passive transport to move minerals and then water into the bloodstream. Because in the case of the feces, okay, there is a much higher concentration of minerals in the actual feces than there is in the blood passing by. That is going to cause diffusion of the minerals to occur. The minerals are going to want to go to an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration in the hopes that it evens things out. So once the minerals leave the feces and are in the blood, okay, the body says, wait a minute, wow, we need to dilute this stuff, so we need to bring water across. So water follows the minerals into the bloodstream. And then it's brought to all the cells of the body that need it. So there's where we get that kind of passive transport, because we use the concept of something naturally wanting to go from an area of where there is a lot to an area where there is little. So in the world of, solutions, this passive movement, if it's anything other than water, so whether it's gases or, like in the case of the digestive system, minerals, this is called diffusion, where we go from an area of high concentration to low concentration. And when we have water moving, the same premise is true in that water is going from an area where there is a small concentration or a large concentration of it to an area where there's a small concentration of it. And that is called osmosis.